Welcome to the Science Behind Vroom and Brain Building Resources to Support Young Children's Learning Birth to 5. My name is Patience Hill, and I am the Community Outreach Project Manager at Child Care Way of America, and I work with the Vroom partnership here at Child Care Way of America. And we also have Candy Novak with us today, and I'll have Candy introduce herself.
Hello everyone, this is Candy. I'm the Technical Assistance Specialist at Child Care Aware of America with the Vroom Partnership Initiative.
Thank you, Candy. We are so excited that you decided to join us for this webinar today. And we ask as you go through this webinar, if you want to jot down any questions you may have and email your questions to us at Vroom, VROOM, USA.childcareaware.org. And we will also share that email address at the end of this presentation. Vroom is an asset-based, and it starts with relationships that are built between caregivers and the lives of children. Brain building with children during their first 5 years gives them a strong base for lifelong learning, as we all know. Vroom translates the leading research on early brain development into meaningful and actionable activities for families with children birth through 5. Everyone, including adults, caregivers, can boost a child's learning with Vroom's fast and fun tips. Today, during this webinar, you will have a greater understanding of early brain development and the science behind Vroom. Also be more knowledgeable of the resources and tools that can support early brain development and empower families. And after today's webinar, you will also recognize that Vroom's free tips and resources are simple to use and can turn everyday moments and routines with children into learning moments. To start this off, we would like you to pause here and click on the link to view the video from Vroom titled, "Everyone Has What It Takes to Be a Brain Builder." Now, after watching the video, we would like you to briefly reflect on what you heard and how you feel. Think about what the caregivers were saying in the video. Did anything sound familiar or unfamiliar? Did you notice any of the ways that the adults and children interacted in the video? Also, just think about your experience as a caregiver. When was the last time you felt validated as a caregiver? We are all brain builders, and we can boost our children's learning in any moments that we already have. Now we want to talk more about the science on brain development. Candy will lead us through that conversation.
Thank you, Patience. So during the next few slides, we're going to look at what your brain science IQ is. So to get us warmed up for this session, I'm going to share a series of true or false statements with you. And what I would like you to do is jot down on a piece of paper whether you think these statements are true or false. When we get through all of the statements, I will go back through and share with you the correct answers. So the first statement is, at birth, the infant's brain is the most mature organ in the body. Please jot down whether that is true or false. Number 2, a young child's brain develops gradually during the first 3 years of life. Number 3, true or false? How the baby's brain will develop its foundation for learning is sculpted by the relationships the baby experiences. Number 4, true or false? By the age of 5, children's brains have grown to 90% of full size. Number 5, we are born with the most brain synapses we will ever have. And finally, number 6, true or false? A child's brain more than doubles in mass during the first year after birth and reaches 80% of adult size by 2 years of age. Now that you've jotted down your answers, we're going to go through and I'm going to share with you the correct answers. Let's see how you did. So the first one, at birth, the infant's brain is the most mature organ in the body. That is actually false. At birth, the infant's brain is the most immature organ. Number 2, a young child's brain develops gradually during the first 3 years of life. This is also false. The brain growth in the first 3 years actually surges over the first 2,000 days. Number 3, how the baby's brain will develop its foundation for learning is sculpted by the relationships the baby experiences. This is true. Both positive and negative experiences builds a child's brain. And number 4 is also true. By the age of 5, children's brains have grown to 90% of full size. So early brain development has a lasting impact on children's ability to learn, to make friends, and to be successful in life. Number 5, we are born with the most brain synapses that we will ever have. This is actually false. Neurons, or what we call brain cells, make up the brain, and the synapses are what happens when the connections between the neurons or brain cells are made. Number 6, this statement is true. The brain is 80% developed by the age of 2, 85% developed by the age of 3, and 90% developed by the age of 5. So let's look a little bit further into the brain science. So we're going to discuss in more detail about the actual architecture of the brain and how the brains are built. So when we are born with the most brain cells called neurons that we'll ever have. And also, these neurons, when they make connections, which we mentioned during our true-false game, these connections, which we call brain synapses, that's what builds the brain. Brain synapses are stimulated by early relationships and interactions. So in the picture that you see on the left, just note that in the picture that a synapse occurs when the axon terminal and a dendrite come into contact with each other when they make that connection. So once again, early relationships and interactions really help facilitate and stimulate these brain synapses to occur. And also when it comes to building brains, scientists estimate that the brain makes around 1 million neural connections each second from birth to age 3. So that's a lot of connections happening. And lastly, as the brain makes more connections, the neural connections build the brain. So more about brain architecture, that structure of the brain. What we know is that the brain is built over time, and it's also built from the bottom up. So, for example, sensory pathways like those for basic vision and hearing are those first things to develop in the brain, and then it's followed by early language skills, and then followed by higher cognitive functioning skills. Higher cognitive skills or higher level thinking skills such as problem solving and impulse control come later on. The brain architecture is comprised of billions of connections between those individual neurons and also across different areas of the brain. And it's the interactions of genes and experiences that shape the developing brain, that shape that architecture of the brain. So genetics and experience are both key ingredients of how the brain is developed. So cognitive, emotional, and social capacities are all intertwined throughout the life course. And we also want to make a special note to talk about toxic stress, because toxic stress also makes an impact on brain architecture. Toxic stress can weaken the architecture of the developing brain, which can lead to lifelong impact. It can lead to problems in learning, problems with behavior, and also impact physical and mental health. So now we're going to look at some different pictures of neural connections happening across time, starting with a newborn all the way to age 6, to see what those neural connections look like. So after birth, brain cells are making connections, as you can see, and connections are happening all the time. And those connections are being made when a child has an experience. So now we're going to look at 1 month. So as the child is having more experiences and more interactions, you can see that more connections are being made in the brain between the neurons, or what we call the brain cells. In 3 months, you see more neural connections happening. And look at 6 months. There is a lot of activity happening in the brain at this time. And at 1. And if you think about a child who's 6 months or 1 year of age and what they're doing in their development, their mobility, their language development, the cognitive skills that are happening, you can see where, that this picture really represents the connections that are happening. And let's look at 2 years. So getting much more dense, and 4 years. Wow, there's a lot of synapses happening. And then when we go to 6 years of age, you'll notice a little bit of difference here. There's some more white space, and it isn't that the child's there's less connections happening. What's happening is there's something called pruning that takes place somewhere between the age of 4 and 6, typically around the age of 5, and it's a natural growth process. It's actually a very important process that the brain goes through. It's pruning off connections that they don't need, but it's helping those connections that they use most often become stronger and become more efficient. Okay. So how do we know this? So there has been a revolution in our understanding of children's minds, brains, and learning capacities. We now recognize that young children know, feel, and learn more than we can have ever imagined. In laboratories at such places like the University of Washington, their iLabs, which is the Institute for Learning and Brains, and around the world, children's natural curiosity and drive to learn is being uncovered in basic research studies. iLabs is now home to a 1-ton machine that you can see pictured here. And this is called the magnetoencephalography machine, and we like to call it the MAG machine for short. This very sensitive MAG machine is able to image the brain. So it's a brain imaging device that can map the mental activity of an infant that's only a few days old. And it proves that newborn brains are anything but empty, that there's a lot of connections happening. So in this MAG machine, when it's measuring the brain activity, it's also measuring that brain activity of a child who is interacting with their caregiver. And it's recording the brain cells and those synapses that are taking place. So we'd like to share a quote with you. If you change the beginning of the story, you change the whole story. And just reminding us that how critical those early years are in terms of early brain development. And now Patience is going to share the science behind Vroom with you.
Thank you, Candy. So as Candy mentioned, we're going to talk more about the science behind Vroom. So babies are born with tremendous potential, and they are wired to learn from day one. In moments when we connect with our children, those neural connections fire in the brain, and really they're taking all the things that we say and do. And so while their genes make up the brain's blueprint, those positive and supportive experiences that we have with children really help their brain grow strong and flexible. And it really makes families and caregivers and any adult in a child's life their #1 brain builder. So rather than telling caregivers, telling the families what they should do, Vroom really focuses on what caregivers, parents, what everyone is already doing right with children. So Vroom's goal is really to try to spark moments of joy and interaction as those opportunities for learning and those small changes that we make in our everyday moments, like mealtime and bath time. We start to think more intentionally about ways that we can encourage more of those quality interactions with our children. And Vroom really celebrates those powerful and really motivates the caregivers to really unite and have a sense of pride and resourcefulness to provide the best start in life for all children. And also, you know, it takes being flexible and adaptable to really meet those unique needs of a diverse group of communities of children. And so Vroom is really able to achieve that within anyone's busy lives. Because it really helps you focus on those everyday moments, and it doesn't require extra time or money. And it's really ideal to build the brain from birth, but it's never too late to start. So Mind in the Making and Vroom have partnered together to share how their life skills and the Vroom tips go hand in hand. So there's a focus on positive adult-child relationships, the back and forth interactions, and also those life skills that promote executive function. So let's dive a little bit more into these areas. So positive connections with caring adults really help a child's brain grow strong and flexible. Humans are social beings and hardwired for those relationships with others, and children learn from those relationships. So a child's first teacher is really their mother, their father, or the caregiver in their life, because babies are born seeking those connections. And an infant must be in a nurturing and affectionate relationship with a caring adult for those healthy social, emotional, cognitive, mental, and physical development. We also want to go over the back and forth interactions. And as you know, those are those conversations that we have that really help build a child's brain in ways that help them with their learning, with their health, and with their behavior now and later on in the future. So having that positive, supportive experience in combination with those back and forth interactions really helps support a safe, nurturing, predictable environment for our children. Also, life skills promote those executive functions. So building life skills like focus, self-control, problem solving, and taking on challenges in their early years really help our children develop today and for later in life. So studies show that school readiness and success, better health, stable finances in adulthood are really tied to having those good life skills. And so Vroom has taken the 3 scientific principles of those positive relationships that we talked about, those back and forth interactions, and executive function skills, and identified actions that make up a brain building moment. And they're called the 5 brain building basics. And you can think of the 5 brain building basics as the ingredients for brain building moments. And going further into executive function-based life skills, we have working memory, being able to keep information in mind in order to use it later, thinking flexibly, being able to adjust to shifting needs and demands, such as transitions in the classroom. Also, inhibitory control, really resisting those distractions and giving a more considered response and avoiding those first reactions. So we talked about the science behind Vroom, so now let's talk more about Vroom. Vroom is an initiative to inform everyone that our children's first years are when they develop the foundation for all future learning. And Vroom is a mission to change the way we think about how young children learn and develop. Vroom is also an outreach strategy to reach families where they are in a non-judgmental way, which is very important because we're not trying to tell parents, families, caregivers how to be a parent, how to be a caregiver, but rather encouraging those positive interactions that we mentioned earlier. And Vroom is also a source of the latest brain research that helps to turn everyday moments into brain building moments, boosting that early learning. So brain building you will hear over and over again because that's what we're really doing. We are building the brains of all of our children. And Vroom is also a family and community engagement outreach strategy that supports parents and families in their roles as their child's first teacher. So now we'll move into building brains with Vroom.
Thank you, Patience. So we're going to go ahead and look at some resources that are brain building resources. And so we're going to look at the 5 brain building basics that were just mentioned. So look, take turns, chat, stretch, and follow. These are what we call the 5 brain building basics. So children's brains have tremendous potential, as you have been hearing. So Vroom has developed resources and tools that are backed by science on early brain development to help parents and caregivers grow their children's brains and help prepare them for school, making friends, and for life. So the brain building basics and Vroom tips that you'll hear about in a little while really encourage families and caregivers to build their children's brain by making eye contact, by chatting from birth on, stretching out moments with follow-up comments, asking questions, and so much more. So the next time you get a chance, take a close look at the 5 brain building basics, because these really are the key ingredients for interaction and to really help grow a child's brain power. So I just mentioned Vroom tips, and the Vroom tips are based on, or these, the 5 brain building basics are embedded in these Vroom tips. And I'm going to share with you a little bit of the structure of the Vroom tip itself, but I wanted to share a little bit more about the collection of Vroom tips. So there's actually a collection of over 1,000 Vroom tips, which is the cornerstone of the free Vroom tools and resources available. The Vroom tips promote brain development for children ages birth to 5. The tips are related to developing language skills, early literacy, numeracy, and also those executive function skills and life skills that were mentioned. The science behind the tips comes directly from Mind in the Making and the scientific advisors. So as you can see, each tip is written to be age appropriate, and it does not require a lot of time or any money to complete. Most importantly, the tips are meant to be fun and joyful, turning something that might be an ordinary, mundane, even chore-like activity into something that can be very positive, a positive moment of interaction. And as you know, children learn best when they're having fun. So let's take a look at the home museum tip that you see before you. On the left side is the tip, and I'm just going to read it to you. The home museum. Invite your child to find some special things and put them out like in a museum or store. Have them lead you through their collection. Ask them to share with you why the items are meaningful. Take turns choosing your favorite things to share with each other. So you can see that there would be interaction. This tip is really promoting interaction back and forth between a child and a caregiver. And then the brainy background explains how this interaction builds the child's brain. So I'll share the brainy background with you. In this activity, your child is practicing important communication skills. Thinking about what to say and how to say it uses memory too. When you listen and share their words, feelings, and actions, you're also building a safe place for learning. So Vroom tips can really give effective, easy ways to promote learning and brain development, and it makes it easy for caregivers to create connections with children, and can also help turn those everyday routines, as I mentioned, into something that is fun and enjoyable and a brain building moment for children. So next, I'm going to pause and refer you to a video called Setting the Table. Vroom has put many of their Vroom tips into video form. And so with it, this Vroom tip video, you will have probably received a link in an email along with this webinar for you to view, but you can also find the Setting the Table Vroom tip video in YouTube as well. So we're going to pause, let you view the video. Okay, now that you've viewed the video, we'd like you to think about what you noticed in the interactions, what the children were doing, what the caregivers were doing. Did you notice any moments or activities you can reinforce and encourage in your own practice? Okay, we're going to take a look at another Vroom tip. And I want you to think about a time where you've had to wait with a child. Maybe it's been at an appointment with a child, or maybe it's waiting for lunch to get ready. We've all waited with children. So here is a tip that can help during those times of waiting, and it was called Take Time to Watch. Now we're going to, I'm going to show you how you can download the Vroom tips to your phone. As I mentioned, there's over 1,000 tips available to you, and you can download this app onto your phone or your tablet, and the tips will come right to your phone. There will be one a day. And the Vroom tips are shared in a variety of ways. So as I mentioned, the Vroom app can be downloaded to your phone or tablet, but you can also access it through the vroom.org website as well. I will mention that Vroom's tools and resources are always free to you. And the next slide will show you the vroom.org website, which is another way to access the Vroom resources and tips for free. And there is also a way to receive Vroom tips through text. You can simply send Vroom to 48258 to receive Vroom tips. And then also you may see Vroom around other places. For example, Daniel the Tiger. Vroom has partnered with Daniel the Tiger. You might see it at community networks and community events. And Vroom has also partnered with Goya, which has different food items, and with Baby Box as well, which is a welcome box from the hospital. And here's some other ways that you may see Vroom. So, very innovative partners have incorporated Vroom in different ways. For example, you see it here hanging by a mirror, and you see some of the Vroom tips in action. The top picture on the left is a very popular Vroom tip called the Cup Tower. Okay. So next, another way that you may see Vroom is through social media. So you can follow Vroom on social media to just see the latest from them, whether it's a tip or an encouraging message. So you can learn more about Vroom through following them on social media as well. So in summary, everyone has what it takes to be a brain builder. And we want to end this webinar with some reflection on what the most important thing that you heard today about Vroom. If this is the first time you've heard about Vroom, what is that most important thing that you heard today? Or if you've heard about Vroom before, but this is kind of a refresher or more in-depth information around Vroom, just think about what has resonated most with you. And jot down those thoughts. And also, if you would like to plan an action step on how you may integrate Vroom into your program, maybe into your classroom, your daily routines in your classroom, or how you may integrate it into engaging with your families. If you do have any questions for us, we would be happy to answer them. And you can email us at vroom@usa.childcareaware.org. Once again, that is vroom@usa.childcareaware.org. And we also do have additional webinars, so you can look for those. We have one on embedding Vroom in childcare programs to support work with families and children birth to 5, and also a webinar on making everyday moments in the classroom fun and engaging with science-based tools and resources for early childhood educators. So really talking about some very practical, hands-on ways to integrate Vroom into the classroom. And there's our website if you have, or I'm sorry, our email if you have any questions. We'd love to hear from you. So we'd like to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.